So, just morning everybody. Welcome to this morning's cabinet. Just bring the meeting to order. Just a reminder to everyone that the meeting will be recorded and available to view if you're minded on the council's website. Could I also ask IT colleagues to start the recording of the meeting? Okay, underway with that now. Christine, can you call for the said? Apologies.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So we have Councillor Douglas Reid.
Yeah.
Councillor Jim McMahon.
Yeah.
Councillor John McFadden. Councillor Elaine Cowan.
Here.
Councillor Maureen Mackay. Thanks, Eddie. Councillor Ian Linton.
Here.
Councillor Graham Barton.
Here.
Councillor Barry Douglas.
Here.
Councillor Neil Ingram.
Here.
Councillor Claire Maitland. Here. And I have an apology from Councillor Filson. Do we have Harriet Johnston? Here. Babs Mowat.
Here.
Thanks, Babs. Alan Vint.
Yes, here, thanks.
Norman Watts.
Here.
Jackie Livingston.
Yes, I'm here.
And can I just check, Councillor Mackay, have you joined?
Yes, I have. Thank you. Present.
Thanks, Councillor Mackay. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, thanks, Christine. I understand somebody's still got their mic on. Just if you remember, there's a bit of feedback noise coming. If you just remember to mute yourself. Okay. Item 1 is, of course, the declaration of interest. I don't think there's anything obvious. If you get any kind of declaration, Graham.
Thanks, Dougie. The only thing I've got is item 3E, the Education Service Report. It's ASN Travel. I don't think there's any decisions get made today. It's just an update. So my son will be using the taxi service to get backs and forwards to school.
Sorry, can I just come in on that one through you, Chair? I would just advise that piece will actually be raised by colleague Sanara today, that particular paper. Apologies, that the inclusion review that's been referred to. Yeah, apologies. I'm happy to take that whatever direction, Chair, through you.
That potentially 2 papers then. It's the ARA and the inclusion.
I think you would be better advised to declare an interest and step out for both. Clearly, if the paper on the review of inclusion service affects your son or daughter, your child, then that would be one interest. And then if they are in receipt of one of the services affected by the school transport paper, then you would probably be better to err on the side of caution and withdraw from both.
Yeah,
but I'm happy to discuss that further out with the meeting because it's obviously your business, but that would be the advice based on what you declared at the beginning.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Okay, and Jackie.
I'm in the same situation. My son receives a taxi to school.
Okay, thanks. You've heard the kind of broad advice there. Okay, anyone else? Okay, thanks. We'll note that when we come to those items. Okay, back onto the agenda and look at item 2E, which is a policy review schedule. And Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. The purpose of this report is to recommend to Cabinet proposed changes to severe incidents policy, formerly known as the severe weather policy, and an amendment to the support and attendance at work policy. The background is standard paragraphs, which are in paragraphs 3 through to 9, 3 through to 7, sorry. And then in paragraph 8 is lays out the scope of the new policy, which has been adapted to include but is not limited to the bullet points there. Previously, as I said, it was a severe weather policy and it mainly dealt with snow. So we've agreed just with learning over the last wee while to widen that policy to cover severe incidents. Paragraphs 9 through to 19 detail the other changes, which are in line with widening the policy, updating the terminology, and including further clarification of the expectation of employees. Paragraph 20 notes an amendment for the support and attendance at work policy, which was agreed at Cabinet on the 15th of February, and it's within paragraph 7.2.2 within the policy and is detailed there. The HR implications are in paragraphs 8 through to 20. Our trade union colleagues have actively been involved in the review of the policies, and discussions have taken place through collective bargaining and teachers consultative groups as appropriate, and all the changes have been agreed with the trade union. There are no financial implications as part of this report, and the recommendations are in paragraph 2, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Amanda. Any points on this? Quite straightforward. Can we agree the recommendations on page 3? Right, thanks very much. Okay, we're going now to item 3, and Graham Barton and Jaffa Livingston's indicated they'll take a step back from this item. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. And through you, there are no recommendations in regards to this paper. So again, in respect of the declarations, I'm happy. It'll be my colleague Ian Burgoyne and Julie Hope, who's online, that will be presenting this paper today. I don't know if David wants to come in any further on this.
David.
I think we've already addressed the declaration of interest. As I explained at the last Cabinet, it's not specifically what the decision might be. Colleagues are identifying that the recommendation in front of members today is to note, but it's to note a whole set of proposed actions set out in paragraph 47, which runs to 2 or 3 pages. All of that will affect the inclusion provision. The test for any member with a child or relative who's in receipt of that service would be, does the reasonable man in the street look at that interest and then look at the content of the paper and decide whether or not that the personal interest might be a determining factor in any member then trying to deal with. So I appreciate it's presented as note, but it's not a whole load of planned actions that will influence and inform and affect the provision of the service for years to come. And in that regard, if a member has a family member who's a beneficiary of that service, the man in the street might think that interest would be sufficient to perhaps influence their vote one way or the other. And the test, as I said at the last Cabinet, isn't is the member in agreement with the paper, it's would their personal interest be likely to influence their position, be it one of agreement or disagreement. So the test isn't the specific detail of the content, the test is what the man in the street would make of the interest versus the overall effect of the paper, and this paper sets out the direction of the provision of the service for the future years. So I would stand by the advice I gave to Councillor Barton in this instance, which is it would be safer to withdraw, noting it's always for members to comply with the code, and all I can do is offer advice.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Graham. Jackie, yeah. Okay. Okay, Linda.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Chair, I'm going to pass to Deputy Head of Education Ian Burgoyne to present this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report is to inform Cabinet of work undertaken and progress made from the review of inclusion in session 22-23. The recommendations are for Cabinet to note next steps outlined in paragraph 47 and otherwise note the contents of the report. Paragraphs 3 to 10 outline the background to the report and include reference to key legislation related to additional support needs. Paragraphs 7 and 8 references the increasing numbers of children and young people in our educational establishments presenting with additional support needs and how we'll seek to manage this within existing budgets. While in paragraph 9, we refer to the 2 consultation workshop sessions for heads of establishment, which took place earlier in this year. Paragraph 10 references Angela Morgan's National ASL Review, published in 2020, and the Additional Support for Learning Action Plan, which we have used to frame the report. The first of the themes from the National ASL Review is the focus of paragraphs 11 to 18, which outline the existing and proposed actions and interventions that will look to ensure effective participation of young children and young people. The presumption of mainstream, which will require us to build capacity within schools to ensure children and young people are supported, where possible within mainstream school environments, or where not possible, are provided with targeted support to meet their needs, is outlined in paragraphs 19 and 20. The focus of paragraphs 21 to 27 is a priority for clear values-driven leadership and the need to overcome fragmentation. Reference is made to the development of an East Ayrshire career-long professional learning framework for inclusion, and paragraph 25 recognises the intrinsic link between the emotional well-being of children and young people to the well-being of the adults in their lives and how we look to support our colleagues as we move forward. Reference is made to resources in paragraphs 28 to 30 and how we need to assess the spend across services and provision and measure impact on attainment and outcomes across all stages. From paragraphs 31 to 36, the focus is on workforce development and support and refers to specific CLPL on inclusive practice, which will offer support for practitioners, and wider staff on inclusive pedagogy, which meets the needs of their establishments and aligns with improvement priorities. Paragraphs 37 to 40 focus on strengthening parental engagement to support and promote positive relationships, communication and cooperation. Relationships and behaviour from paragraphs 41 to 44 refer to the refresh of the existing relationships framework and will continue to emphasise that mental health and behaviour are linked and seen as wellbeing concerns, and that behaviour is given the same level of assessment and intervention as other wellbeing concerns and additional support needs. Paragraph 45 refers to the need to ensure children's rights are embedded and effectively underpin implementation of the SL legislation. While the focus of paragraph 46 is the requirement for local authorities to establish and implement quality assurance processes to drive improvements in practices and outcomes. From paragraph 47, the report outlines the steps we are taking or intend to undertake as an education service to drive inclusive practice and inclusive leadership forward. Paragraph 48 outlines legal implications and refers to the various duties and education authorities in connection with the provision of education for children and young people with additional support needs. The financial implications in paragraph 49 show the increasing levels of spend related to additional support needs over the last 5 years and the projected spend for this year. And finally, appendices 2 to 5 provide local context and underline the increasing pressures on existing resource as numbers of children and young people with additional support needs continue to increase. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ian. Do you have any questions for Ian? Elaine?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Ian and his team for this very detailed and extensive report and update, as you would expect for such an important service. Obviously, there's some cost pressures on the service and the staff from the increased demand here, so it's reassuring to see the amount of effort and work that is being focused in this area. Myself and Councillor Richardson recently attended On Thank Early Years Centre, and there was some excellent best practice that the staff there had implemented based on a lot of the learnings from COVID, actually. In fact, it might be worthwhile that information, if it's not already been shared, that goes to our health and social care partnerships as an example of good practice that perhaps could be rolled out in other areas. Touching on a couple other things in the report, I note that the Children and Young People's recent joint cabinet meeting, the importance of pupil voice was raised by the young people themselves. So it's good to see that that's been picked up in this report. So that's another area that would be good to strengthen. And obviously, I'm sure elected members will all support young people getting a voice and bringing forward local politicians of the future. I also note that all our education establishments are involved in the UNICEF Rights Respecting School Awards, and that's an amazing achievement as well. And the final point I'd like to make is on the financial implications of the transport. Obviously, we have another paper today from roads, so I won't dwell on that at the moment. We can pick that up in a fuller discussion later on today. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Elaine. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Maureen? You there, Maureen? Maureen's hand, is there any issues with the...
Sorry, no, I'm sorry. I was just
Yeah.
trying to get the mic off. Apologies for that.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Councillor Cowan for making some of these points there. I know that there have been concerns made in terms of On Thank, that they're very proud of what they have actually achieved, but they do consider that it is labour and cost intent. So I'm interested to hear from the Head of Education in terms of, or from Ian, in terms of cost implications, in terms of taking this approach and rolling this approach out a wider area, and ensuring that what we're not doing is we're not diluting what has been demonstrated to be able to be achieved at On Thank early years. And I would like to just have absolute clarity in terms of the transport. And again, I think it would be helpful to just, there's a differentiation between costs within the transport, and I think it would be helpful, please, if we could just have, for those of us that are not specialists in this area, the contrast between special, central and ASN transport, and just clarity in terms of what budgets, what is in paragraph 49 actually impacts on, please.
It's one, Linda.
Yeah, thanks through you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mackay. Really good questions and observations in that particular space. And if it's okay, I'll take these in turn and then hand to colleagues who are involved in the financial aspects of the review towards the end of the questions there. So the first point, you absolutely rightly identify, Councillor Mackay, is around about the labour and cost intensity in making inclusion happen, if I can be as broad as that, if that's okay. And clearly, Councillor Cowan also making reference to the great practice that we've seen in On Thank ECC in terms of inclusive practices. I think there's some great news in this space that I would really like to share in this regard. So there are several brands of inclusion members for noting, and the first of which is Nurture, that we can all identify with. So that it's this bit about, you know, loving and caring for our children at the very outset, and if we take that as broad as Nurture, when this becomes more specialised, we move into didactic developmental practices and neurosequential modelling, which kind of become brands of the bigger piece around about relational practice. And the piece here, Councillor Mackay, that I think you're absolutely right to be, you know, pressing on in that regard is, do we have the resources to size and scale these particular developments? So there's a couple of observations I would make. First of all, we've got 20 schools on journeys in regards to neurosequential practice and the developmental didactic practices, but as I say, all of which fall under the banner of relationships. And indeed, as you'll note in the paper already, and as referred to by Ian as he went through this, the whole piece around about relational practice really sits front and centre about how we want all of our teams to work with all of our children in regards to a consistency across East Ayrshire. The other big piece of resource that we don't really cost in this, Councillor Mackay, is the availability of an absolutely superb educational psychology team, and indeed the work that we do with our partners. So actually all of the resources don't necessarily come from education, because a lot of these are from speech and language therapy, educational psychology, health and social care partnership, occupational therapy, that actually make the relational practice work. So in terms of size and scale, we're really confident through the work that we've already seen in cases like On Thank and other schools who've really embarked with absolute great gusto around about relational practices journeys, if I can be as broad as that, and nurture journeys, but they all follow the same pattern of letting the young people know that they're valued, loved and cared for. So we're absolutely confident that we can do this. The one piece, Councillor Mackay, that I think you absolutely again rightly recognise is about where young people need more intensive support, and that's clearly labelled in the paper. That is where the costs do become more potentially difficult, but again, they would be assessed on a an individual basis. And again, they form part of the young person's statutory requirement to have any additional support needs actually fulfilled. So we're really happy in terms of the way relational practices are developing across the authority, and the way that On Thank have clearly, I would say, really led on that journey, and they were supported by a team of 4 educational psychologists actually within all of that. So we're really proud of what they've done, and they're really our flag bearers, if you like, for what we want this to look like. But there are several schools hot on their heels, or indeed actually beside them, in terms of this work, and it would be our plan in the last iteration of the service improvement plan that you'll see in front of you today, and indeed laid out in the inclusion plan, to make sure that that's scaled up, regardless of resource, because a lot of the things that are aligned to this are actually free. Teachers having a relational practice is free of charge, which is a wonderful thing to be able to say, and I would like to think that that's something that our staff would be really proud of. So I'll pass to Ian around about some of the deeper questions, if that's okay, Councillor Mackay, and also my colleague Julie Hope, in regard to the budgetary aspects that sit around about the transport and the special central via the ASN transport, if that's okay, through you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I think if Julie's there, Julie would be best to speak on the specific question that Councillor Mackay raised regarding the financial implications.
Thanks, Ian. I am online. Apologies for my croaky voice at the moment. Councillor Mackay, just in response to your question around paragraph 49, the special central budget, which is outlined there, is the staffing and other costs to operate our specialist schools, and the ASN transport therefore is a distinct budget, which is the budget to transport the children and young people to those resources. So probably we should have, I should have outlined that a bit more clearly in paragraph 49, that's what that refers to. So the special central budget is the staffing cost to staff our specialist provisions, and ASN transport is distinct from that. I hope that's helpful to clarify that part.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful, Julie. Anyone else? No. Okay, can we go to recommend?
It's just to ask for.
Oh, Maureen, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. It's just to ask. Thank you, and that is very helpful. Both to Linda, thank you, and also to Julie. It's just to ask Julie again in terms of, so what is it exactly that you anticipate will happen to then both those budget lines in terms of this proposal? I think that's really what we're looking for here. Thank you.
Thanks, through you, Chair. I can respond to that. Thank you. The anticipation is that over time that we would be able to reduce certainly the transport budget, Councillor Mackay, given the proposals around how we're going to look again at ASN transport. In terms of that special central staffing budget, I don't anticipate any immediate or short-term reduction in that budget, given the growing numbers of children and young people attending specialist provision and the continuing need for that provision. So I think for certainly for a period of time that's going to remain. It's about a bit of a balancing act we're playing, I suppose, here, where we have a continued investment in our specialist resources, because we absolutely need those to meet the needs of a number of children and young people. But at the same time, we're investing more within our mainstream settings to be able to support more children and young people there as well. And it's hoped that eventually over time the balance will tip and we will be able to reduce a little maybe the spend within the specialist provisions as more is invested within mainstream. However, we're certainly not at a point of being able to do that just now. And the overriding concern for us is to make sure that we invest the resource where it's required. So as long as that resource is needed to support children and young people in specialist settings, we need to continue to invest there. So there's no proposed saving or efficiency in terms of our specialist provisions. Where we will need to really have a good look, and we've already started that process through Ian and his team, is looking at the ASN transport budgets to see how we can alleviate some pressures within that.
Thanks, Julie. Maybe bring in the Chief Executive, Eddie.
Thanks, Leader. I mean, I'm purely looking at paragraph 49, and you can see over the 5 years that our spend on transport has increased by 100%. When we can see our increase in spend and that direct, support and education of our children is only increased by 8%. Clearly, what we would want to do is, wherever we can, is shift some of that, resource so that more money is spent in terms of that direct support of our children, in a local setting, rather than increasingly paying, out on transport. So I think the paragraph very clearly lays out, where our priorities we want to be. And actually, if we can do that, and at the same time, meet with the local and national aspirations to keep young people in their local communities when we can, then that's the direction of travel we're trying to describe here.
Thanks, Eddie. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful. And could I just get absolute clarity? Because again, in my discussions with officers, it hasn't been completely clear to me. The ASN transport, who is actually currently responsible for that budget line? Is that health and social care, or what aspect of our service is responsible for that, please? And I take indeed and would support completely the points that the Chief Executive have made. That really is the principle of actually being able to focus on young people and not merely on transport.
Yeah, I think we'd all agree there. When you see the doubling over that period of years when other professions only went up, and as we all know, the demand for special need profession is going up and up and up exponentially.
Julie, do you want to speak to where the ASN transport budget sits?
Hi, Ian. Yeah, the ASN transport budget sits within education. So that's distinct from the mainstream transport budget, which we're going to hear a further paper on from ARA, who hold that budget. So yes, it sits firmly within education.
Thank you, Julie. And I think that that's important to us to again pick up on the Chief Executive's point about looking at how we actually free up spend to spend on the young people itself and not the transport costs. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we'd agree. That's a point well made. Anyone else? Okay, can we go to recommendations? Paragraph 2, can we agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you. And now going to item 4. We'll get Jackie and Councillor Barton Graham back in. Jackie, are you back online?
Yes, I am.
Good. Just wait for Councillor Barton. I hope the canteen's not. I hope that's not. Oh. Thanks, Graham. There were folk accusing you of going to the canteen there, but I've taken up. Okay, that's everybody back, and proceeding now to item 4, and that's the Learning Estate Management Plan. Andrew Kennedy. Andrew, where are you?
I'm out the back.
See, that was you. You always go to a different corner.
I know. So, thanks, Chair. This report outlines the Learning Estate Management Plan for 21-22. This is part of the Council's overall asset management framework, and is a requirement for submission to the Scottish Government. This builds on previous school estate management plans that we've been reporting to the Scottish Government for about the last 15 years. We've changed the name of it this year, and we'll build on that for future years, linking to our own asset management framework and recognising that wider role that our learning estate is having beyond just the schools and the requirements around their conditions, suitability and occupancy. So the report, the covering report obviously just highlights some of the key points which I'll go through, but the main report is attached as an appendix that provides obviously more detail. As outlined in paragraph 6, the Learning Estate Management Plan sort of summarises the Council's vision for the learning estate and the policy, property management plan and asset management framework, provides an update on the current status of the learning estate and identifies current investment and progress made, as well as sets out the priorities for the Council to achieve its desired standards. Recognising that there has been significant investment over the last 10 to 15 years across the education estate. I think paragraph 9 in particular notes that we've spent about 230 million, with a further 122 million already programmed within the capital programme. The report obviously also highlights a number of facilities where we've made some progress. Clearly, the report is kind of joint or sort of somewhere between updating government on 21-22, but also trying to obviously give a more up-to-date position for members. The key pieces of information within the report where that determine our priorities going forward are around occupancy, condition and suitability. And members will see within the report, particularly over that kind of 10-year period, we've seen significant improvements to meet our objectives of improving the efficiency of our occupancy, bringing all of our schools up to condition A and B, and obviously improving the suitability around the facilities within the education establishments. There's obviously a number of specific locations where we've got higher occupancy or lower occupancy, where we've got condition that still needs sort of further improvement, and obviously where that investment will be targeted going forward. But again, I think overall we can see there's a significant improvement, and virtually all schools are meeting our objectives, and where we haven't reached that target at the moment, there's clear areas where we've taken action or proposed actions over the coming months and years. The only other key point that I maybe bring members' attention to was obviously just kind of moving forward in terms of that wider investment, and clearly we've been successful over a number of rounds of government funding for our learning estate, and clearly the current government policy around the learning estate investment strategy. We've had support for Doon Campus in St Sophia's that we're currently working on, and members will be aware we did put a bid in for phase 3 of the learning estate funding prior to Christmas, which we would hope to have an outcome for. I do anticipate we will hear something maybe within the next month to 6 weeks, but what we've set out within the report is just sort of setting out and giving that understanding that these schools still are our priorities. So whether we've got successful funding bid or not, then we would still look to utilise our existing capital and potentially other funding sources to move forward with those projects, and that's sort of set out within the report. The report is normally submitted to the government for March each year. I have been in contact with the government, both in terms of the Learning Estate funding bid, but also just to kind of acknowledge that once we go through our normal governance arrangements, then we will submit the report after that process. And they were comfortable with that timeline. So happy to take any more detailed questions and present the recommendations in paragraph 3 on page 35. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Obviously, you mentioned here in terms of school capacities, there's a number of schools, including Ward and Annan Hill, where we had to build modular units. Obviously, that's not particularly satisfactory, but it was a better outcome than what was there before. And the knock-on effect some of this is going to have in some of the secondary schools. What are we doing to make sure LDP2 and we're in terms of provision that we have enough provision and enough capacity that we can adopt LDP2, and what do our projected roles look like, and will there be a report coming to council on that, because it's obviously a concern for most areas, as we can see here.
Yeah, I think one of the key actions going forward in terms of future learning estate management plans is we will look to provide more forward planning information within the report. As members will recall, last year we did make a change to the standard circular around our secondary school occupancy levels. And although what that does is demonstrate that actually the space is maybe kind of, there's more space than maybe the figures currently are presenting in terms of the overall capacity of the schools. I think there's also a number of actions that will clearly been taken. And I think if you take, for example, the Grange campus, obviously the restrictions around the intake on Annan Hill, we've actually seen a reduction there where they were taking 5 classes from both Park and Grange. That's now down to 2, and obviously the additional 2 modular units as well as assisting there. Again, when we look at the projections around Annan Hill, the overall school roll will come down over the next couple of years as well. There's around 80 children in primary 7 at the moment, and there's about 55 coming into primary 1. So over the next couple of years, we could see a reduction of about 60 within the current school rolls. And obviously, as Linda and colleagues have already presented in terms of that inclusion proposals, will also have an impact on the capacities around some of the schools across the estate. So a number of things are already happening that we're seeing that impact. We have also got some further analysis in terms of future projections. And again, when you look at some of the schools where we're seeing those pressures, there are spaces within those schools that are not currently identified as teaching spaces. And also when you look at the calculations, things like outdoor space, etc., is not included in the calculation. So I think there is other things that we can do out with building more classrooms that can certainly improve the quality of the overall space and manage some of those kind of future pressures. We're also seeing that when you do see some house building, it does kind of create a bubble in terms of the number of children. So it's maybe for about 2 or 3 years, you see a larger number of children, and then the intake starts to kind of drop down a bit. So some of them are temporary pressures, but clearly we would hope that there is a longer term growth within certain areas within the authority. But overall, we've also seen a significant reduction in the last 10 years in terms of the total pupil numbers across the authority as well. So it's a bit of a balance between kind of where our accommodation is and meeting those kind of needs. But certainly in future reports, we would propose to present much clearer information in terms of those future projections, and not, as this report shows, just 1 year.
Thanks. I'm a regular to the Parent Council at Annan Hill, and it's almost a standing item, and it's just I think there needs to be that wee bit of reassurance. And when I see the development of Fardo Hill and You know, the old Ellerslie, that's looks as if it's possibly come to fruition through LDP2, etc. You know, I know there's been problems in the past, and I think we need to give as much reassurance as we can to the schools that we've thought through in terms of the projected roles, and take cognizance of that, because it's certainly been a problem in the past. Okay, thanks for that, Andrew. John.
I've got a question, but it kind of harkens back to the last paper. I know we're still talking about education. Would it be all right to ask the question?
Well, I'll ask it and we'll see if it's relevant to this paper, John.
Well, basically, obviously we were talking about reducing costs by the inclusion and trying to have this special education things set around about the area rather than moving the children. Originally, in the budget, we intended to reduce certain teacher numbers and roles, which then we couldn't. All I was wondering was, can those teacher roles that we have to maintain be used to provide a more area-specific special education requirements, thus reducing the transport, thus those roles are more useful, if you know what I mean, rather than having teachers that we otherwise. I just wondered whether the funding that would be used to keep the teacher roles up could be used to provide the staff required to do the kind of specialist education we were talking about.
Okay, no, thanks for that, Linda.
Yeah, thanks. And through you, Chair, Councillor McFadden, again, a good question. But really the teacher numbers alluded to in regards to the previous aspects discussed in the budget would already be deployed in these areas. So I know my colleague Julie Hope's been working really hard on this. I've just seen her appear on screen. I'm going to let Julie come in a wee bit further on that consideration, Councillor McFadden, because you're right, it does connect back to the inclusion paper, but these would be staff already likely deployed in that area of work. But I'm going to just bring Julie in briefly if that's all right.
Thanks, Linda. Yes, Councillor McFadden, absolutely. We've already been working towards that for the last year or two. We've been deploying more teaching staff to areas where we have highest level of need in terms of additional support need. So that has absolutely been thought of, and as a continuing piece of work for us. That it's not a matter of teachers that we may have lost through an earlier proposal being moved, but we actually have to have the right people in the right place at the right time. In terms of actual specialist resource, the teachers there are highly skilled and undertake further training, so it's not a straightforward matter of somebody being moved from one establishment into the specialist sector. That's a very specialised area of work, but we certainly have been deploying additional resource from our teaching workforce to support across a range of mainstream settings over the last year or two, and we are continuing to do that. We've got plans for that again for the next year. So I can assure you there will be no teachers sitting about surplus or twiddling their thumbs as an extra anywhere in a school. All of our teaching workforce, are very much actively deployed to supporting the needs of the children and young people that we have in front of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Yep. Anyone else? Okay, can we go? Can we agree the recommendations before we go to the next item? That's the 6 recommendations on page 35. Agreed. Okay, and we're now going to subsidise school. Sorry, Maureen.
No, I'm sorry. It's my mistake. I'm just struggling to get my mouse where I want it to go. Thank you very much. It would be wrong of me to let this paper go and to not make comment on. I am very glad that there are some sets of alternative plans being put forward if we are successful in terms of the bid, and if we are not successful in the bid in relation to the proposals for change of Willowbank, Mount Carmel and Onthank School. So again, that is to be welcomed, although of course if we are not successful in getting the funding from the Scottish Government, that will be a significant disappointment. But again, I welcome officers have actually put proposals forward. And also additionally, because people know that my concerns extend across all schools impacted in Northwest Kilmarnock. So I'm also glad in terms of what is presented in the papers before us in terms of priority given to Hillhead Primary School. And I think that's absolutely appropriate. So I look forward very much to seeing how that work progresses. So that's certainly something that's positive. I did want to ask Andrew just a question. It's a question that he knows that I have asked, and it's in relation to just to expand further on what going forward 5-year projections that we have, but against 3 very specific schools, and that would be Sorn, Little Mill and Catherine, please, in terms of projected numbers.
Thanks, Maureen. Not just maybe before, I totally agree with your comments in terms of the Northwest and a plan B, and I agree with you in terms of where we need to go with Hillhead. You know, I'm maybe an interest in terms of my own ward, but I think you're absolutely right there, Maureen. But in terms of the school projections for Catherine, Son and Little Mill, Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Previously a discussion with Councillor Mackay, and we do have the detailed information on the projections across the schools, which I'm happy to share with all members, just for that sort of further detail. In terms of the schools noted, those are the schools that are sitting at the lower end of our current occupancy percentages, and in terms of the future projections, in terms of Sorn and Little Mill, then the projections are fairly consistent over the next 5 years or so, and in terms of Catherine, we're seeing a slight increase in the numbers around those, but realistically, because they're still fairly small school roles, then the overall occupancy levels will still probably stay around the 60% mark.
Okay, so just to confirm, so we're sitting with Sorn at about, what, 20 at the moment, and our projection in terms of new build is that will go up to high 30s, Andrew. And again, Little Mill, now I know there has been some demolition at Little Mill, and that's projected to go up from about 20 to 25. So against that demolition, I wonder if you could comment. And again, I think we're looking at what, Catherine, up to about 160 over the next 5 years.
Yeah, so in terms of the specifics, projections for this year for Catherine's 134, projections for 27-28 is 158. In terms of Little Mill, it's the other way around. So it's kind of this year it's 25 and it will reduce to 21 over that period of time. And Sorn is currently at 28 and it'll go up to 37.
Thanks very much. No, that's okay. Helpful. I think it's just always helpful to sort of, you know, just see where that actually is. And what we're actually looking at. Again, I would be interested when we come back to revisit this in a year's time with the Learning Estate Management Plan against the paper that we've just had, what the impact will be in relation to these numbers in terms of the changes that we have agreed at paragraph 47, and that is about trying to keep children local. So as that plays out, it will be interesting for us, I think, to reflect back on numbers here. Thank you.
I think we agree with that. Andrew?
Yeah, maybe just one additional point, and obviously just reflecting back on the previous paper, it is something that we've obviously been building into our existing projects. So there has been additional space built in terms of near a third. The plans for Doon Campus and Stewarton Academy also have spaces identified within those that would strengthen that ASN support as well. So there's obviously some additional investment already agreed and planned that will support that inclusion approach that was mentioned in the previous report.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Andrew. Okay, can we go to recommendations, paragraph 3, page 35. Can we agree recommendations? Okay, and now going to item 5E, and it's the subsidised school transport, active travel and alternative delivery model. Kevin Braywood. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair.
Hold it just a second, Kevin, before just reading Councillor Barton and Jackie, and possibly Jackie too. Okay. Well, sorry, just for clarification.
I thought I might be all right. This one, I think it was.
Maybe just a wee quick adjournment, just take 5 minutes.
Just for the record, Chair, we've... All right, sorry.
Okay, everybody, I take it that's 5 minutes. Just maybe get David to come in and just discuss the matters of interest.
Just to clarify for the benefit of all parties present, members and others, the paper on the school transport SPT and focuses particularly on what we call the subsidised element. If any member of cabinet, be it a councillor or non-elected member of cabinet, has a family member who's in receipt of the bus service, then clearly best advice would be to withdraw from the meeting. If any member of the cabinet, however, has a child who's in one of the taxi journeys, then that is not affected by this paper. This is purely about the buses. So in that situation, I would simply suggest that for absolute transparency, the member declared the connection, which is the lesser alternative. It's simply that connection for avoidance of doubt, because there is that use of school transport, but not that what's covered by the paper. So against that backdrop, to be fair to Councillor Bardon, that reflects his situation. So I would suggest that we record simply that connection, so that clarity is there and the transparency is there, and it's just looking for confirmation from Jackie Livingston, given that I think we bumped her into the same situation, and that clarity, if she has a family member in receipt of a taxi or supported by taxi, then that's fine. There'd be no need to withdraw. If she has a family member in receipt of the subsidised service, it's very much the focus of the paper. I would advise any member of the cabinet to withdraw in those circumstances. So it's really down to the factual circumstances of each member.
Thanks, David. Jackie, you there?
Yes, I'm here. My son gets a taxi to school.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, in taxi.
Thanks, Jackie.
Through you, Chair. If you're happy, Jackie, we'll record the same connection, just so it's there for consistency. I know you're not an elected member, but we'll record that anyway.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Thanks. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, my niece is in receipt of a school bus, but given it's from Darvel to Galston to attend Loudon Academy, it should not be impacted by this. But I just want to make that clear that I have a family member who does. Obviously, it is getting a free school bus, but not a subsidised place, as I understand it.
Again, Councillor Douglas, through the Chair, I would suggest we adopt the same approach and just declare that as the connection. But you're right, if your niece is in receipt as an entitled pupil because they're within the statutory catchment distance, then that wouldn't be affected by these proposals, which are purely about what we're calling the subsidised extra buses. So probably treat your interest or connection the same as the other two, just for transparency.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, members, for clarifying those matters. I think we needed to do that. We now go to item 5, and that's the subsidised school transport, active travel and alternative delivery model, and over to Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the current financial position for mainstream education transport, outlines the individual pressures that have led to the current budget position, proposes a consultation information exercise on options to reduce costs and investigate an alternative delivery model. The background to school transport is detailed in paragraphs 3 to 9. The total school transport spend in financial year 21-22 was just over £4 million, resulting in a budget overspend of £454,000 against a budget of £3.6 million. At the period 9 review, it was anticipated that education transport will outturn £683,000, greater than the £3.6 million budget in 22-23. Paragraphs 10 to 12 details the level of transport provided. The majority of pupils in receipt of subsidised transport are based in Kilmarnock for attendance at the Grange Academy, St Joseph's Academy and the William McIlvanney campus. All other pupils in receipt of subsidised transport attend Robert Burns Academy. Paragraphs 13 to 22 provide details on the major cost drivers. Public Services Vehicle Accessibility Regulations, known as PSVAR, temporary exemptions were in place until July 2022. Operators involved on home to school transport applied to the DFT for a further extension to the exemptions from July 22 through to July 2026, which was granted to allow them sufficient time to comply, which is based in percentages in terms of their overall fleet numbers. However, as pointed out previously, there are no exemptions if fares have been requested directly or indirectly. The subsidy payments we receive would fall under this. As these contracts are due for tender to commence August 2023, we can expect much higher contract costs as we would need SPT to procure such a contractor that currently meets the PSVAR regulations on these routes. SPT are engaged on behalf of the Council working on this issue alongside operators. Whilst costs of the introduction of PSVAR measures are unknown, it is anticipated that these will need to be met in full by local authorities through increased costs being passed on via contracts. Paragraphs 29 to 45 provide options for change: application of statutory minimum transport entitlement, removal of non-statutory subsidised school transport, active travel, and the alternative delivery model. Additional funding of 497,000 was provided in 2020-21 to offset unavoidable school transport budget pressures. However, the pressure of providing the subsidised service remains, with a net cost for 22-23 projected to be 462,000. The statutory requirement will remain. With the introduction of free bus travel for those under the age of 22 from the 31st of January 2022 and options for active travel, it is proposed that a public consultation information exercise be initiated on removing the option of the non-statutory subsidised school transport and directing those affected to the new free service bus travel scheme and active methods of travel, and targeted active travel corridors through the active travel strategy are reviewed and implemented to allow our pupils to cycle, walk or scoot to school safely. Targeted rural areas where an alternative delivery model has the potential to be economically viable. The recommendations are contained in paragraph 2, and myself and George Corbett are happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks very much, Kevin. And can I thank Kevin and the team and colleagues from Finance for developing this paper. We recognise that this is now a service under financial stress due to rising costs under the current operating model with the regular feature in East Ayrshire performs. I'm minded to continue this paper in order for the service to develop the detail on the consultation and engagement approach, risk and mitigation, particularly with reference to active travel and opportunities that exist for free public transport for young people and taking account of the limited resources available. I would ask Kevin to work alongside other officers within the council to bring back a further paper back to Cabinet in early course. There's some really good aspects to this paper, but I think it's important that we fully engage with the public in a real and meaningful consultation. I know there's, it's quite an emotive subject, and there's nothing more precious to us than our children and ensuring the safety and of our children in active routes. But we've got issues like the infinity loop that's coming on board, discussions that we need to make sure we've got safe crossings, the issues with the bus stations that are ready, Kilmarnock bus station in particular, but not in other bus stations as well, where there's got a huge convergence of pupils, and I think we need to have some kind of reassurance in that model and build that up before we go out to consultation, so that we can give parents and pupils alike as much reassurance as we can as well. And also in terms of rural areas, a big issue in terms of lack of frequency in some of the rural areas. So I think we need to bring these proposals back. I know it's been, it's in I've had a number of emails from parents. I'm quite sure most of us have as well, right across it, because it affects right across East Ayrshire, but there's certain pinch points where we know that there are issues, and I think it's important that we bring this paper because it is a financial burden on the rest of the road service, but I think we need to go into full consultation and continue the paper and bring back a full and further report. So I move Jimmy's.
I absolutely agree with you, Doug. I think there is a lot of good stuff in the paper. I think there's a lot of stuff that we're suggesting that potentially we're going to do, which would have enhanced that active travel strategy for us. The likes of having bikes in place and such like, and the safe routes, which is all well contained within that. I think working going out there in that wider consultation, maybe with other colleagues that provide transport, might alleviate maybe some of the fears that through the emails. Personally, I haven't received any yet. I dare say once the paper's picked up on maybe my local ward, I might get the same type of correspondence that's been received by other members. Just taking it away is not an option, as we know, and it's recognised within the paper. I think we need to look at alternative delivery models that's mentioned in there, and the wider issues concerned with the parents. But I absolutely agree with you.
Thanks. Yeah, you're quite right, Jim. There's other opportunities there for our partners. We need to engage with them as well as the public, you know, in terms of possible new bus services, etc., between our communities. So hopefully we can deal with this issue. It's important that we brought this issue to Cabinet today. Can we, Elaine?
Thank you, Chair. I actually have had significant correspondence from parents in Ward 2, Kilmarnock North. I'm happy to share that information with the officers outside this meeting, although I suspect they may know some of the issues already, but I think that might inform the consultation at an early stage as well. And as you pointed out, some of the issues centre around the Kilmarnock bus station, especially for the children, which is a significant number, almost 300 children travelling through that bus station from different schools. So I think that's a really important point. And as Councillor McMahon pointed out, it's not just the remit of ARA to come up with this resolution. We have to involve other partners outside the council to develop the best solution if we are going to change this non-statutory and recurring severe cost pressure on the service. I think we need to all get our heads together and have that proper consultation before we proceed any further. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Okay, members, I've moved continuation. Can we agree? Thank you. Oh. Is there a hand up? No.
Yes, it is. It is. Sorry.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor McMahon, you mentioned the issue in relation to bikes. Now, that takes us back to, I understand at one point the Scottish Government had proposed that there would be an offer of bikes for all school children. I wonder if that's something that we can investigate further. Certainly, I do concur with the level of correspondence. I have had in the order of 20 emails from people residing within Northwest Kilmarnock who would be affected by this. So I hear the proposal.
Thanks, Maureen. And in terms of the cycle issue there, yeah, I mean, everything will be explored. And if members have anything they want to add to the consultation, I'm sure Kevin and his team will be quite open to that, because, you know, anything that can help, you know, a healthy lifestyle, but you also look to, you know, address some of the cost pressures that we're having here, you know, will be welcome. And obviously, welcome any comments from the public and their partners. George, then Elaine.
Thanks, Chair. I would just want to point out a couple of points with the level of emails that's come into the inbox of mine and Kevin's and many others over the last few days when it became public on this. What I've noticed is there's been some misinterpretation. I think genuinely people out there are now thinking that we as a council are removing school transport and putting everybody on with they're under 22 free travels. I just wanted to make the point clear. This is about the non-statutory subsidised service only, which in the main is the main urban areas within North and South Kilmarnock is where the large numbers are. Is that again? the costs are there is for everybody to see at the present time. The second point is the overall cost is just over 580,000 annually for these services. Where, you know, the net is taken with an income of 120,000. But if we retain an income on that services, the key point is a PSVR, we would have no option but to enter into contracts that must meet PSVR. So I just wanted to make the points clear. And furthermore, these contracts are due for retender after 5 years. So SPT are predicting 10% inflationary costs across all contracts. Where that is the case or no, we'll try and mitigate against that wherever possible, but that's the reality as well. Thanks.
No, that's a point well made. There has been a wee bit that I've seen a wee bit misinterpretation, but it's up to us to make it kind of that wee bit clearer to people just what's involved here before we take a further decision. That's why I think it's maybe appropriate that we have a continuation. Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. And just to quickly pick up on that point by George, I'm very clear this is a non-statutory subsidised service that the council is providing, but it is a service that families have, over 600 families have relied on for several years. So that just for me reinforces how important it is to do a proper consultation. One thing I personally was not aware was the Public Services Vehicle Accessibility Regulations. So again, that's an opportunity to educate everyone on what the implications are there and the further changes that requires. But my main point, what I was wanting to come back in was there is some really good points in this paper, so I don't want us to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The developing the safe, active travel routes around our schools is something which I fully embrace. The health and wellbeing benefits for the pupils and environment is well documented. And likewise, the promotion of the under-22s free bus travel and investigation into alternative development models, which I'm really interested in, are progressive actions, which have my full support. Thank you.
Absolutely, Elaine, and we know that we've invested in a lot of capital work in terms of safer routes to school, in terms of providing for cycles and the Infinity Loop, which is a massive investment, particularly in some of the areas that come out in north and south, for example. And I think that's important, and we need to take cognizance of some of these. But hopefully we'll draw all that out during the consultation process. Okay, just a couple of comments, Neil and Claire.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, it's just obviously it's important to take into consideration the budgetary impacts of this. And if what George was saying, that 10% is going to be added on, that'll be 5.5 million. Looking at the increase that we're talking about. So I think it roughly about that. So in regard to the money side of things, absolutely we need to look at possible solutions. In regard to the community safety side of things, I'm glad to hear that obviously we're going to be considering making sure that any sort of path to school, any routes to school are safe. And in regard to the bus station itself, obviously taking into consideration that at this time in the morning, lots of people will also be going to their work. So it's just being cognizant of the impacts to not only pupils, but the wider public.
Thanks. Claire?
Just on what Councillor Mackay was saying about the bikes, that is something we are going to have to factor in. I know 1,000 bikes went out on trial last year, and the trials haven't long concluded, and they've got to 2026 to roll out the bike programme. So that is also something that, we can take into consideration in the consultation. Thank you.
Thanks. Maureen, Councillor Mackay. Maureen.
Much again, and it is just, I suppose, to look at all of the papers, and certainly parents that I've spoken to, this is conversations that I've had out with Cabinet this week, and that is part of what we have a responsibility to do, is to, yes, consider individual papers, but also consider the presentation of changes that we know are pending in the round. And I think it is important when we consider both what the proposed education service improvement plans are and also the paper that we have had in relation to educating children actually more in schools. And we actually look at that. And we look at that overall in terms of not just for now, not what our past experience of education has been, but how we actually project education being delivered within this new configuration that we're anticipating going forward. And I think that really does have an impact and has an impact on all of the points that have been raised, particularly if we are anticipating some of our young people integrating more in relation to their local schools, what that actually means, what that means when there are parental concerns on issues that, Leader, you've already described in terms of bus station and convergence of large numbers of young people. I think we have to take all of those anticipated changes that we are planning for into consideration when we are looking at any particular items. I'm really raising that to say this is not as straightforward as it looks, and I do think consideration should be fully given to all of these aspects.
No, I think you're absolutely right. That's why I think we need to have the full consultation and a bit of further work. Maureen, I would agree with you there. And one thing I don't think anyone of us around the table would want to compromise the safety of our children getting to school. We'll get Jackie Lumps. Jackie.
Can I just ask for clarification? When will the consultation start and when will it conclude, given that there's anxiety amongst parents about school bus travel for the next academic year? Just looking for a timeline, please.
Thanks. No, that's a valid point. We need to get this, fairly soon. Kevin.
Through you, Chair. I mean, we will start the consultation process. We'll need to pull all the information together, the information that we've currently received over the last week or so. I would also want to speak to some of our partner agencies that we work with and maybe get them round the table and sit round the table with them and then start to pull together the consultation in detail.
I think you mentioned in the contracts have to be developed for, when was it, August?
August.
So I think we'll be looking sometime certainly before then.
Sorry, through you, Chair. I would hope to have everything ready and concluded just before recess. I would think would be a favourable timeline.
Okay, well, that seems reasonable. David, sorry.
Just to be clear in terms of process, and I've not had the chance obviously to discuss this, it's quite fluid, but if Cabinet's continuing the paper, then the intention was to get Cabinet approval for the consultation. If Cabinet's asked for the paper to come back, presumably it'll require to come back to Cabinet before the consultation can be started. So I think that's the short answer to Jackie, is that the consultation won't start until Cabinet has received the next paper, because that's consistent with the position that was brought today.
Yeah, that's fine. And I think the whole thing will be concluded hopefully. It certainly has to be before August, but if we can do that before the recess, I think that's giving ourselves a realistic timescale. But the sooner we can get it, the better, because we don't want uncertainty out there. Okay, so can we give the continuation? Thanks, colleagues. Right. That's
Chair, sorry, that would be the end of the education items, but I've received notification by email from one of our education colleagues that there's financial matters that need a degree of correction on the back of some of the responses were given earlier. Given the nature of the clarification that's proposed, I think it would be advisable simply, the non-elected education members of Cabinet are still here to actually, if through you and members you're agreed, is simply to revisit the item on the agenda agenda today now and let Julie Hope offer that clarification so that members have the full information, and then we can put it into the minute rather than just clarifying through the minute for the benefit of all members. So Julie's notified there's a correction, and what I'm suggesting is if you're agreeable members, you agree to reopen item 3 simply to hear additional information that's been identified and take it from there, if that's okay. Obviously, it's within the competence within the course of the meeting to revisit agenda items if you're minded to do so. And the advice would be, I think it would be better for Cabinet just to be made aware of this correction while we're here, if that's okay.
Yeah. That's not the one that you declared. Yeah, I'm just making.
Sorry.
That's the one that you declared. Sorry. And Jackie too. Okay, I will. In terms of advice I've had from David, we'll go back to item 3 just in terms of clarification.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'm just going to ring Julie Hope in, who has identified the correction. She's ready to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Chair. With apologies, members, it regards, I'm going back to paragraph 49, which we discussed at some length earlier on in the meeting today. When I was responding to Councillor Mackay's question, I was correct in saying those two budgets are separate, the ESN Transport and the Special Central that were identified there. But I did have a bit of a concern in the back of my mind about the Special Central budget, how it had really increased very little. So I'm back to just double check all of that, and actually the wrong figures were used in that table. It should have been the special devolved figures, and I will issue this by writing, so please don't worry that people will have the detail of this. The special central budget, which was identified in the paper in para 49, is actually our central resources for support and inclusion. So that includes our East Ayrshire support team, visual impairment team, hospital education, etc. So that's that team, and we have worked hard to try and maintain the levels there without increased costs. The actual budget that I wanted to reflect on was the special devolved budget, which is the actual budget which is devolved out to our specialist resources, our schools and settings where specialist education is provided. And when you receive the new table, you will see that does show a marked increase between 2017-18 and 22-23 projected. In 2017-18, the figure of special devolved budget, which is mainly made up of staffing costs for these resources, which was 5,587,727,000. And by the time of our projected figures for 22-23, our projection is that it will be 9,004,000. So quite a difference here. We've got a difference of about 3.4 million approximately in the last 5 years, which would reflect actually the narrative in the rest of the paper, where we have reflected on the fact that we are investing far more within specialist provisions, and also reflects the increased numbers that you'll see in the appendices, the numbers of children and young people attending such specialist provisions. So it would be an expected increase, that when those numbers are increasing exponentially the way they are, that the number of staffing and the other resources required to support them would also increase. So can I just offer my sincere apologies for the error in that presentation there, and I'm happy to, through Christine and the team, to provide you with the updated figures and have the paper updated to reflect that. Thank you.
That is really, can I apologise to members for that. Thanks for that. I think it was absolutely appropriate that we made that correction. It's a significant correction there. And thank you, members. Any comments on that additional information? Okay, I don't need to read it. Just note the changes.
We'll cover that in a minute. I just thought, given the information there, it was, and members were here, the opportunity was here just to offer the correction, and then we'll build it into the minute. So if members are happy with that, it will be reflected in the minute. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, David. Okay. Councillor Barton's back. Jackie Lewis. Jackie, you back?
Yes, I'm back.
Good. Just one more. We're asking non-elected members or education reps if they want to hang on to hear the first service improvement plan. It's in relation to education. If you want to, I think it's maybe of interest to you. Okay, and I now take item 6 and invite Eddie, in the first instance, to go through the service improvement plans.
Thanks, Chair. Just very brief introduction. Members were aware for the last cabinet was a suite of the service improvement plans within, Katie's, the Deputy Chief Exec's portfolio. This set of service improvement plans, sits within, like my own portfolio. And as previously, we will have, the heads of service, introduce each of them, followed by any input that we want to get, from members, and asking each of these as we go through. So happy to pass to Linda for the first education portfolio.
Thanks, Eddie, and through you, Chair. Clearly, as Eddie has already framed, members, this represents both a look back at the Service Improvement Plan for Education, which spans the years 21 through 24, and also offers a look forward in terms of the remaining year of the plan, which takes us from 23-24, and I'll be handing over to Graham McGinn in regards to looking forward aspect of that. So, members, we are absolutely delighted to discuss the looking back aspect of the progress against the improvement plans to date, and I'll just pick some highlights from that, recognising the length of the document. First of all, for the benefit of members new to the education planning process, we use the National Improvement Framework as our guiding practice document in that respect, and therefore use the 4 headings that I'll go through in regards to the look back across the plan. So, members, in regards to literacy and numeracy, all aspects of the plan are good and continuing, or indeed achieved. Clearly, these are not aspects that would disappear from any future iteration of the plan in respect of education, and they're contained within pages 94 to 97. Can I make an apology on this one? Some of the text has been squished, I think is the technical term for this, when the document was changed from Word through to PDF. So, for the benefit of members, I will just briefly add that the figures in 2021 for SCQF 4 were 95.1, SCQF 5 literacy 81.2, and SCQF 6 literacy were 53.4. For numeracy, again in target 1.3, 89.6 for level 4, 71.8 for level 5, and 27.8 for level 6. We are clearly absolutely delighted with the direction of travel. We would just advise members that we are still carrying the aspects of the alternative certification model as it pertains to leavers data. So clearly, members, in those pieces of data in 1.3, you will recognise that some of this was the alternative certification model in regards to either the predictive formula that was used for exams and subsequently then the use of teacher estimates during the COVID pandemic, colleagues. Baselines for literacy and numeracy are contained in pages 88 to 89, and I know my colleague Graham McGinn will discuss further in regards to the incorporation of stretch aims into the future iterations of the plan. Colleagues in health and wellbeing, which is target 2 in our plan, are heading to. Again, all aspects are good progress or achieved or continued. I'm delighted to report on a point made by Councillor Cowan earlier that every school in East Ayrshire is now registered for rights respecting schools in terms of the award process. I think we're one of very few authorities in Scotland to be able to claim that. So every school is on that journey between the bronze and gold awards, which is absolutely incredible. Also recognising the continued great linkage I believe we have in education with our young carers service and indeed developing with our kinship carers service. Again, the incorporation and the continuation of our Young Carers Champions programme. Our baselines, again, whilst more difficult to ascertain in health and wellbeing, are contained in page 105. Colleagues, again, moving to closing the attainment gap, again, good progress and continuing, as I'm sure you would note by the data contained in pages 106 through 111. Again, I would point in the direction of the discussions we've had already in regards to additional support needs and inclusions. And again, the baselines for this particular section can be found in page 112. Members, I'm sure it'll be no secret. I think I've told everyone that I know, but you will be aware that we've achieved the greatest positive destinations result that we have ever seen in East Ayrshire in our history, putting us in the top 5 now in Scotland in terms of that actual figure. So in the positive destinations, there's clearly quite a lot to celebrate. So I would first highlight once again the good progress in continuing across all of the targets, but I would need to reference the highest positive destinations ever, which coming off the back of a pandemic for the young people in East Ayrshire is absolutely astronomical, and I'm hugely grateful to the staff out there and the other services who support us with the young people in that regard, and indeed the part we believe that our sector leading approach of SL33 makes for these young people. We're also clearly making connections across into the Ayrshire Growth Deal with my own remit in economy and skills. And again, members, you'll note the baselines in page 115. So members, through you, Chair, I'll now pass to Graham McGinn to take us on the looking forward aspect to cover the last year of the plan spanning 23 through 24. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Linda, and through you, Chair. The looking forward section of the plan builds on the strengths and achievements that have already been detailed by Linda. And the looking forward section also details the commitment to partnership working to achieve the best possible outcomes for children and young people, whether that's via practitioners, head teachers, central officers, wider council services and partners, including Ayrshire College, Education Scotland and our Regional Improvement Collaborative. The plan is detailed across pages 117 to 125. I won't go through it all, but I'd like to highlight some areas of the plan. 1.1, that ongoing focus on pedagogy to further improve learning, teaching and assessment, what goes on in our classrooms every day. 1.3, Scottish Government has introduced stretch aims, which Linda referenced, and they are developed locally in key measures, and they're listed in Table 1 on page 117. 1.4, that ongoing service commitment to professional learning. In this particular context, it's linked to realising the ambition in early years and the expansion in particular around about early years. 2.1, the commitment to children and young people's rights, as well as the views of learners influencing decision making. And across a number of points, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 and 3.1, that ongoing focus on effective use of funding and resources to meet the needs of children and young people aligned to areas such as the Promise, school counselling and wellbeing support, as well as the Scottish Attainment Challenge plans. 2.11, the importance of relational practice and the ongoing professional learning in this area. And finally, 3.5, to further develop collaborative approaches to quality assurance across all schools. And that's been introduced this session involving central officers and head teachers visiting schools to support ongoing improvement. So happy to take any questions, members.
Thanks, Graham. Any questions for Graham? Oh, so there's a hand out there. No.
Yeah.
Oh, Maureen, yeah.
Thank you very much. It was just to ask Graham in terms of I know that there was a temporary post put in for supporting head teachers within primary schools. I wonder what's the anticipated future in relation to that, and what data have you had in terms of, has that been something that's been effective?
Thanks, Councillor Mackay, and through you, Chair. Yeah, collected quite a bit of data in relation to that, Councillor Mackay. It's telling us quite a lot in terms of strengths within schools, what's working well. It's allowing us to signpost head teachers to other schools, and in fact we're actually involving head teachers, as I referenced, in visits to other schools, both to share good practice but also for head teachers to learn from colleagues in other schools. So there's a lot coming out of that. We're in the early stages of it, and hence the reason why I've referenced our plan to further develop that into next session. We are planning to continue our focus on that next session, whether that's the current post holder that continues in that or otherwise. We'll have further discussions around about that. But so far, the process itself is working very well, and it's something we'll certainly be continuing.
Thank you very much. That's very encouraging. And certainly, again, I would want to congratulate the achievements that have been coming forward, particularly out of positive destinations and the work of SL33. And I know as that expands, we can only anticipate to see the expansion of that. Now, I have an interesting one here. It has been raised with me, so I would like to pass it on. And it comes under the heading really of being. But not necessarily under the heading of well-being leadership, as you would anticipate directly, but I think there is something significant in that, and that is in relation to the uptake of vaping from young people, particularly within our secondary schools, and how that really has a real impact, questioning really in terms of, is this an outcome in relation to long COVID? Is this evidencing young people's anxiety levels? And again, I see we have got some guest in from Health and Social Care Partnership this morning. Obviously, vaping and the research that's coming out now in the development of a condition which I understand is classified as popcorn lung, clearly is something that's important going forward. So when we're looking in health and well-being, and I know we do a great deal of focus on mental health and well-being, but again, physical aspects, new physical aspects, post-pandemic, how are we responding to that? Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. That's quite an interesting one. Yeah, absolutely. Wanda?
Yeah, through you, Chair, and Councillor Mackay, once again, this is something that we're acutely concerned about in the service, both in regards to the availability of vaping, shall we say, and indeed the allure, given the colour and flavour associated with the kind of vaping culture. So it is absolutely, as you rightly identify, a culture that is on the rise, both in and around schools in terms of, you know, the age of the young people, but also socially and indeed in the demographic that you'll see in terms of local shops, etc., where that this culture is apparent. So there's a few things that I would probably respond to from an education perspective. So the first of which is the ongoing response of the PSE curriculum to this. I think falsely a lot of the young people think there are no health risks associated with vaping and see it as a healthier alternative to tobacco. Which clearly there is a lot in the media about in terms of what might happen, etc. There is not so much on the vaping piece. So at this point in time, we have leads in health and wellbeing who are addressing the PSE curriculum to look at vaping specifically and take more information into schools, and also for the sake of my several of my non-elected colleagues as well, to the parent piece as well, because quite a lot of the parents are rightly concerned about the vaping culture. In regards to the health and social care perspective and an NHS perspective, I'll maybe leave that for my colleague Martin to come in on, but certainly from an education perspective, Councillor Mackay, it's at this point in time, it's an education piece. And actually our campus officers have been really good. They seem to have some really good up-to-date intel. So clearly, rather than the kind of waggy finger approach, it's very much about the education piece and making sure the young people are aware that this doesn't come without risk. I'm not sure about the research, Councillor Mackay, as to whether this is an output from COVID and stress, but certainly what I would probably recognise is that vaping's bigger than smoking has ever been on a school perspective in terms of head teachers having to deal with this on a day-to-day basis. So I would absolutely recognise that. So I hope that answers the question, Councillor Mackay, and I don't know whether through you, Chair, my colleague in the Health and Social Care Partnership wishes to input on the matter.
Thanks. No, it's an interest. I mean, we really don't know. We're a wee bit uncharted territory with this one, and it's interesting. I mean, I'd only heard, you know, football teams banning their players, you know, youth teams from vaping are just very much discouraging it. But I hadn't heard of popcorn lung or anything like that, but it's all very worrying. I don't know, Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just very briefly, we've not got a specific programme of work around vaping, but in terms of our engagement with individual young people and discussion around various risks, behaviours that we might want to educate them on that, but that is part of individual work that takes place with the young people we're engaged with.
mean, I don't know, for instance, if it's something we can look through licensing or anything like that in future. I don't know whether we do, or it's maybe something that's, or maybe a can of worms there, but it's an emerging.
Through you, Chair, they are already subject to regulation. I think 18's the cut-off age for, they are age restricted at 18 for the vapes. The CEU do enforce the regs. There are a number of premises that we have repeatedly visited and will continue to visit. Sometimes you get information to the effect they're coming from the stores. Sometimes you get information that the stores are providing them to young people, other pupils in some locations, and there is anecdotal evidence that the distribution and sale is actually happening in that model rather than over the shop counter. But wherever we are signposted or wherever we have reports of concerns about vapes, which is, as Linda says, proliferating, then we do what we can. It's an age-restricted product. It's the same enforcement techniques using young people to test purchasing. The real difficulty is there are rules, etc., around test purchase, and when you comply with all of them, it makes it really unlikely a test purchase is ever going to succeed, not least because usually these suppliers will know their local audience, their local market, the local young people, purchasers, customers. And it's not just young people, everybody's vaping these days. But in terms of the age restriction, it can be harder to get a successful test purchase if they don't know the pupil, if it looks like somebody from outside. I won't go into detail because I don't want to spoil the surprise for some of the operators that think they're going to continue with this, but there are other things we're looking at. There might be other ways to skin those particular cats, if you can say that. It's probably breaching other animal welfare legislation, but never mind. So we are enforcing the laws that are there. Obviously, it's not a license, it's an enforcement matter because they're age restricted, but they're not restricted to licensed stores. So obviously, you know, if a newsagent's there, may not even have an alcohol license, but those other products are age restricted. And while they don't need to be licensed to sell them, they do need to have tempered to the law. So anyone that's making a practice of selling the vapes to under 18s is breaking the law, and we will continue to try and identify and enforce the law and report them for prosecution.
Thanks, David. No, I'm quite sure I should have realised that you were on the ball with that one. Thanks very much. Okay, Maureen, you happy with that?
Certainly, it certainly is an interesting one, and I think sort of, you know, Head of Education's comments in terms of knowing that this is more widespread than smoking ever was, certainly is something that should alert us to real concerns. But again, it is asking that question of, is that an indicator of something else? And, you know, just what is that something else? Because the focus clearly that we want is young persons' successful and ongoing development into workforce and into having healthy working lives going forward. So it's about how we actually embed all of that at as early a stage as possible.
Thanks, Maureen. Okay, I think that's from the Education Service Improvement Plan. That concludes that. So if the education non-elected members want to leave at this juncture. Okay, we're on now to corporate support, and Ian.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. The starting point for looking back at our key service achievements in the last year would be the implementation of our service redesign approved by Cabinet in February 2022. This enabled the creation of our new settled management arrangements following a significant period of change, and also facilitated the creation of the Council's Corporate Programme Management Office. Another key achievement was the development of the Council's high-level strategic framework in the shape of the 5-year strategic plan and related detailed action plan, all of which is, of course, supplemented by the medium-term financial strategy, digital strategy, climate change strategy, and workforce plan. We have also continued to build on and strengthen our commitment to support the delivery of our community plan, thematic delivery plans, and local outcomes improvement plan. We've also maintained our commitment to the equalities and diversity agenda, including the promotion and availability of free period products. and we continue to focus on securing the duty of best value through a performance management framework, which service improvement plans are such a key part of. Looking ahead, Chair, we will continue to support the Community Planning Partnership and will be undertaking self-assessment activity to inform further improvement. The PMO work plan is now well advanced and will help secure the realisation of the key objectives and ambitions set out in the strategic plan. Linked to this, corporate support is tasked with a couple of specific actions, including driving improvements in the use and management of data and maximising the use of our EQIA toolkit to impact assess our policies, strategies and functions. Lastly, Chair, another emerging area for the service is leading work to refresh the Council's arrangements for corporate risk management, and again, that is well advanced. And Chair, in closing, I want to take this opportunity to record my thanks to all of my colleagues in corporate support for their hard work, commitment and dedication over the last year, but also to acknowledge that as a support service, we could not do what we do without the support and assistance we receive from other services and from elected members. Thanks, Chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Ian. Do we have any questions, comments for Ian? Okay, thanks for that, Ian. Now go over to Finance and ICT and Joe McLaughlin. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. We start at page 144, and in the looking back section, we have 21 action points. Majority of those are listed as achieved or achieved and continuing. And just touching on some of those points, perhaps around financial analysis and that important financial intelligence that the service maintains, not just for today, but for the future, to make sure that the council and the actions and the decisions that you take as elected members are informed by that sound financial management. The best value service review was approved by Cabinet in January, and that's now become the basis of moving the service forward in the months ahead. We also took the opportunity to continue the work we did during the pandemic to automate a whole series of forms within revenues and benefits, which makes that process slicker and more streamlined and less stressful for those who use it. It builds on that process where we had certain success in terms of paying those COVID grants during the pandemic. We also highlight here our PSN accreditation continued as well, working with colleagues in Democratic Services to allow this meeting to take place today online and also to support members with digital surgeries as we go forward. Maintaining our IT security and that enhanced cyber defence that was mentioned in the service redesign is also important. And touching on some other points here, some are ongoing, some are good progress. We have one which is suspended, that's around the development of direct debits for debtor system, because we're taking the opportunity to review the wider debtors system, given the information we have around the users of our services and how they are more online now. And as part of that, there's an opportunity here to look at how we engage and take payment from people as we go forward. In terms of moving ahead, starting at page 153 in the parts that are listed here, we recognise here that Finance and ICT is a service that is forward-facing. We have a large section of our staff who are customer-facing in revenues and benefits, customer services and the Scottish Welfare Fund. We're also, as Ian touched on, a support service that seeks to support other services and colleagues across the council. But fundamentally as well, we're also a service that's strategic in terms of looking forward and maintaining that safeguarding the council, preparing the council for the future and driving and delivering those results. And it's in this part here that we take forward the aims and objectives and the approvals you gave us as part of our service redesign. And it's here we pick up the important work around our cost and performance and that local government benchmarking framework, the report published just this week. It touches on number 3, the look at our cost and our priorities, but perhaps stretching that a bit further and looking at that across the community planning partnership where possible. Some already achieved in terms of those important resilience indicators put into the budget report that gives us some confidence and reassurance as we go forward in this turbulent times in terms of public finance and wider finance generally, and also noting the creation of the Innovation Fund, which has also been achieved. Also very conscious that there are some points here that both colleagues and elected members are waiting for around Office 365 and the work that Paul and Ian and Roy have done in terms of ICT and digital to bring that forward. A whole host of work being done in the last few months to put in place that important infrastructure that lets us bring on board Office 365. And you'll hear more about that from CMT, but also through political groups in the weeks ahead. We're also aware that elected members really have some concerns around the wider telephony piece across the council, and Marie-Claire Gallagher has worked with colleagues across services and across corporate support to put in place a programme that will and a process that will hopefully make that more effective as we go forward. And we'll hear more about that again in group settings and CMT in the weeks ahead. And just touching on number 18, to try and streamline Scottish Welfare Fund. You know, members from East Ayrshire Reforms, that's overspending, but it's also a process that's bedded and almost welded to primary and secondary legislation, which means making any changes to it almost impossible. But we are trying to streamline that to try and get those payments out faster and those applications in quicker, that we can bring some relevant of stress-free and reassurance and support to those who need it most. Continuing that important work around young people, supporting those in their schools who are looking for a career, both in terms of work experience and those modern apprentices and graduate interns. And finally, members noting as well that as part of the Ayrshire Growth Deal, East Ayrshire Council is the lead body. I am the accountable officer, and it's a year ahead in 23-24 when we see probably a dozen or so projects across Ayrshire spring into life and start spending as the outline business cases are approved by government. I'm happy to stop there, Chair, and take any questions.
Thanks. You know, one of the most valuable services we have, one of the most important services we have in the whole council, and you know what we're doing, you know, in tackling poverty and inequality, in particular, and issues like the Scottish Welfare Fund, when we're under tremendous pressure. I think you know we really should thank for all your efforts, particularly you know the constraints that we're and the pressures that we're in at the moment. Ian.
Thanks, Dougie, and thank you, Joe. I mean, I think you touched on it very, very briefly, Joe, but the significance of the evolution of ICT, not just within your own side of things, but right across the council and indeed our community partners. I mean, it can't be underestimated the value that we can see. You know, this being rolled out and evolving. I think it's quite an exciting time to be here, just to see just exactly where we can take this.
Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Joe. I'm now going to governance, and that's David Mitchell. David.
Thanks, Chair, members. It's moments like this you pause to reflect where you've been and what you do. Governance started as admin and legal, I think, after a previous restructure in the year 2000. I was appointed as head of service in August 2001, September 2001. It was then procurement came and joined us, and then admin went into became democratic services under a separate head of service. We then had to create the information governance team, which is a small team of 4, the data protection officer, deputy data protection officer, and the 2 colleagues that work in records management down at the BMK store. Regulatory made an appearance previously. They came into legal, procurement and regulatory at the point when democratic were standalone and with a period of time together. So regulatory have been bedfellows in governance before this round. And then latterly, on the back of the most recent management restructure, planning and building standards and regulatory, which is obviously environmental health and trading standards, were brought into governance from September 21. The focus since then has just been, as you would expect, trying to refresh, revive and bring these services forward out of COVID, as we're all doing, out of everywhere and everything we've done, just trying to get everything back up, performing at peak efficiency, making sure any backlog, any workload that's accumulated during COVID, any backlog of applications, we've worked through them and just getting things back on track. The main piece of work that's outstanding sits with me in planning, and I do need to bring a paper to Cabinet, which I will bring forward shortly, to seek approval for arrangements for the appointment of a formal appointment of a chief planning officer under the most recent planning legislation. At the moment, we are still working with interim model, with interim operations manager reporting to myself, but I will be bringing a paper forward seeking through Cabinet Council approval in terms of the scheme of deals, etc., to appoint a chief planning officer. That won't be a chief officer in terms of the pay and grading. It will be a chief planning officer role in accordance with the statute, reporting through myself in terms of bread and rations and reporting directly to committee, etc., in terms of the statutory function. We haven't stood still, though. We haven't purely been focused on performance. We've looked at building standards, although we have kind of formally parked the service redesign that was outstanding for some time prior to the move being made. We have actually dealt with large elements of what that would cover under that banner anyway. Building standards colleagues, when they came to us, I think they'd had a long-held concern in terms of the current offer, the pay and grade within East Ayrshire compared to some of our neighbours. And there was a particular concern that one of our neighbours nearer to the seaside was about to refresh and relaunch its building standards service with similar roles at better paid grades. So we've already conducted and concluded an exercise in the last 12 months whereby the surveyors post, the senior surveyors post and the team leaders post have all been submitted through job evaluation, and the outcome of that has now been implemented. So we are less at risk than we were of hemorrhaging building standards staff to the seaside or anywhere else. Within regulatory, there were some operational performance matters that have been addressed positively, and we're now in the very good position of looking to recruit a fresh team leader for the pollution control team, while still continue to enjoy the benefit of the considerable years of knowledge and experience from the previous incumbent, because rather than depart, he has asked to, and we've accommodated him to continue in an EHO role rather than the team leader role. So we get the best of both worlds there. We have 40 odd years of experience retained in the team, and we get the opportunity to bring in a team leader that will enjoy support from the previous incumbent, which isn't a situation you always get. So there are things afoot as well in regulatory to try and, as I say, get them into the best possible fettle as well. Business obviously continues as you expect with legal and licensing. The main impactor there has been the absence, as members are aware, of the legal manager for the last 6 months for personal reasons, health reasons. But we're glad to report that he's back and making his presence felt as always. So that's a bonus as well in terms of what we still have to do here. And Democratic colleagues, obviously, that they came back into governance some time ago, and I think around the 2015 restructure, and we continue to work well as well, along with procurement, who've remained with us now for 20 years. So that's the kind of background in terms of services we provide. It's 8 services, it's 6 managers, and we are continuing to deliver the best possible service as we can, and as you would expect. The matters in here, I won't go into in any great detail. They simply reflect, I won't call them housekeeping, some are a wee bit more substantial than that, but they simply reflect the kind of things we have to do, you would expect us to do as part of normal business, to make sure we are operating efficiently and effectively, that we are making best use of not just policies and processes, but technology, etc., etc. And there's a few instances of that throughout the action plan as well. So I'm happy to take any points or queries, Chair, members, in terms of the detail. But otherwise, as with colleagues, I would commend the service or the update to you in relation to governance services. But we're always happy to receive any further feedback about where we can do even better. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. It's amazing how history repeats itself in terms of lures to the seaside, as you put it. But we always manage to lure them back inland. A number of examples amongst us today. Okay, any comments or questions for David? Okay, final bit then is people and culture, and Amanda.
Thanks, Chair. Like colleagues before me, I don't intend to go through any detail, just to pick up a few points. As members are aware, I recently brought people and culture service redesign and went through quite a bit of this detail. If we look back for people and cultures, pages 169 to 171, a couple of key achievements that I would pull out is the review and the implementation of the revised pay and grading structure. This saw a pay uplift for approximately 3,000 of our employees, 90% of which are also residents of East Ayrshire. Another key achievement, the development and implementation of the organisation one-year workforce plan, which was developed and implemented and has now moved on in the 5-year workforce strategy, has been approved, and we're working through that. The implementation of iConnect system. This is a digital solution between our payroll team and the pension fund. We were first in Scotland to achieve the implementation of this, and the payroll team managed to do that at the same time as moving to monthly payroll. The look forward pages are in pages 172 to 180. All the actions have been aligned to the Council's 5-year workforce strategy and take forward the priorities that was detailed in the service redesign that was brought to you in January. With that new establishment within People and Culture, that will help to take these pieces of work forward. Again, just picking up a couple, the review of management structures has been achieved, but will continue as we go forward. We're in the process and have made good progress of devising an annual development plan for the Council's management team. We still to progress, but we're in the early stages of the planning, are undertaking the review of alternatives to the previous employee attitude survey. That's about making it more fit for purpose and meaningful. And we'd be remiss in me, although members are well aware of the further development that we're undertaking with pathways and apprenticeships. Brought a paper here recently which showed that 109 employees have been appointed to the council and 10 in the process have been appointed, with 55 scheduled for next year through the creation of the Jobs and Training Fund. There's also obviously the national, depending what happens with independent care review, the review of the implications for HR, for our employees, and we've established the People and Culture Equality Forum, and we'll be taking forward the action plan that's linked directly to that. Support for the integration of social media within customer services. There's been good progress made there, and the review of functionality and accessibility of the intranet. Our communications teams is working closely with our colleagues in ICT to take that piece of work forward. The last one that I would note is the review of Talent Link, including contracts module. This is so that we can ensure that we've got a digital end-to-end process from recruitment right the way through your employment journey. Happy to take any questions.
Samantha, that's that report. Anyone want to come in? Okay, good to see the progress of jobs and training. It was mentioned last night at Kilmarnock Business Association, some of the people that were participating in that scheme. So good. Okay, so I think that's us through all the reports. So did you want to conclude anything on the reports, sir?
No, thanks, Chair. Nothing more to add.
Okay, so just go to the recommendations. We give you the recommendations. Okay, can I ask, now go to item 7, can I ask for a 5-minute recess? Maybe back here at 12:10, 8-minute recess. Okay.
Indeed.
Okay, we'll just give folk a few seconds to settle down. And hopefully we'll get Councillor Jones from Governance and Scrutiny has joined us, hopefully.
Hello,
You there,
Chair.
Elaine?
Yes, I'm here. I'm online. Can you hear me?
Aye, that's fine. You make it back for Christmas last night.
And that was a big meeting there too. Aye.
That was the aye. Okay, so we've got item 7. We'll now go the outcome and recommendations from the call-in of a decision of Cabinet 18th of January, community asset transfer, Old People's Cabin, Howard Park, Kilmarnock. Who's presenting?
Yeah, we don't have that many call-ins. I don't know if there's actually a process, but I'll maybe just introduce it, and then obviously it's really whether the Chair of Governance and Scrutiny Committee has anything to add. But just to direct members then to the paper at page 181, the Governance and Scrutiny Committee met on 2nd of March. They considered the terms of the call-in, and the outcome is set out on page 182 at paragraph 7. The only additional recommendation that came back from the consideration by the Governance and Scrutiny Committee of the matter was that at Roman numeral 4 on page 183, which I don't think was completely left field anyway. That was just recognising that the commonly recognised need for trying to offer further public comment, assurance, and you'd built that in something similar at the Cabinet, or Cabinet had built that in terms of a nod to or consideration of further steps to be taken in setting up a forum. And the consideration at GNS thought it might help to offer that further public assurance about what is actually being approved here, what it will look like, what the impact will be, that might be better coming in the form of a joint statement from yourself, obviously as Chair of Cabinet, and from the Chair of Governance and Scrutiny, to try and present that united front on the merits of the matter, having had that level of scrutiny. So the only additional recommendation is the one at Roman numeral 4 in relation to that joint statement, which should obviously reflect the thoughts of yourself and the Chair of GNS as to what it is, what the message is that you would want to send out in the back of this process. Just by way of absolute completeness, the opportunity was taken just to clarify from the original Cabinet minute at page 182, paragraph 7, Roman numeral 1, the Cabinet paper did rightly set out that which is ironic given that the whole of the discussion was round about whether or not any decision to make the transfer was predetermined or already decided upon, which was part of the public concern as stated and reported. And it's ironic given we've been to Cabinet, Governance and Scrutiny back to Cabinet, but as that further amendment or addition just highlights, we are still subject to the approval of the court through the common good petition process. So it was just to clarify that although it was in the report, that to make sure for the public record and for public consumption that the next stage, should Cabinet accept the recommendation today from GNS, would not be to implement. The next stage would be to petition the court to get permission under the common good to allow the transfer to take place and tick that kind of legal box, if you like. So that's not an addition, that's just a clarification to get the order of things quite clear for public consumption. As I said, that Cabinet's decision today would not be the final decision. The Sheriff will have the final determination to make on the petition for the common good. With regard to the joint statement, I know colleagues have looked at that and are looking to work with yourself and the Chair of GNS should Cabinet accept the outcome today in terms of then putting that in place and putting that out to the public domain. I think that's a fair summary of where GNS got to. I think the proceedings, I think, were about 5.5 hours, so I clearly haven't done them justice in the detail, but I think I've accurately reported the outcome from the committee's consideration, and it would, through you, Chair, subject to anything that the Chair would wish to add herself. It's really now for Cabinet to decide whether or not to accept the outcome from GNS as set out in paragraph 7 of the paper. Cheers.
Thanks, David. No, I would accept the recommendations that are coming from the Governance and Scrutiny Committee, and we have the Chair and I have had informal discussions. We both share our concern to address mental health and wellbeing issues within our communities. But we also agree that the public deserves some reassurance on matters, and I would propose to, prepare a joint statement with the chair of Government and Security to give people that reassurance, particularly some of the issues that come out, just in some of the detail in terms of the user groups and the low risk and issues and the hours opening, etc. And I'm quite sure that we can reach an agreement there, and maybe bring in the Lillian as chair of Government and Scrutiny if she's happy with that as well.
Thanks very much, Chair. I don't disagree with anything that you've said. I think we all recognise the importance of reassuring our communities, as well as the value of having accessible local mental health services available for those who need them, when they need them, and that's really important. And moving forward, which is something that we should all strive for, is that we should continue to communicate clear and accurate information to the community throughout the development of the facility, and to help build good relations between all. My hope would be that through hard work and commitment, the outcome would be that both the community and organisation respect and learn to live alongside each other, and that we don't anticipate any adverse issues arising at this location. Just as a point of information for Cabinet members, I'd just like to advise that as part of Internal Audit's role and assurance, continuous improvement and driving up compliance programme, the Community Asset Transfer Framework has been included and agreed within the 23-24 work plan. So that would offer reassurance to members as well as members of the public, but certainly a joint statement by not only the Chair of Cabinet and Chair of Governance and Scrutiny, but by two local members. I think that's really important, and I'm sure that we can work something up that we can both agree and be comfortable with sending out. So thanks for that, and I'm delighted that you would accept that, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks very much, and we will closely monitor it. We've all got a stake in this, and we all want to see it succeed and give the public that reassurance. And thank the chair and the Governance and Scrutiny Committee for their deliberations. David, I need to do anything else?
No, nothing else, Chair. Just Councillor McFadden has his hand up.
Off the back of all that, I would like to think, if there was any more asset transfer things going ahead that became contentious at all, the minute there was any contentiousness, visible, that the ward members and or the leader of the council would be able to step in at that much earlier stage and stop any misinformation or make immediate corrections, if you know what I mean. So we never get back here again, if that's at all possible. I mean, I think it's only reasonable when these things are going through, if there's any animosity picked up at all, it should be brought to the attention of the ward members and leader of the council, because we don't want to go here again.
Thanks, John. I think that's a good point that you make. And we want to spare our communities any unnecessary alarm, but we did meet in terms of the four ward members going back to when Councillor Cook was the councillor prior to the last election. We had some kind of concerns then, and we have worked kind of collaboratively, but as always, there's always lessons learned, and we take them on board. And I think there's lessons learned for everybody on this, and hopefully it will be a successful venture, because we know post-COVID we've got some big issues in terms of well-being and mental health that hopefully we can work collaboratively and do something about them. Okay, close, is that okay? Okay, we now go to the item 8, which is a selection, appointment and remuneration of independent reviewers for public protection learning reviews. Eddie.
Thanks, Chair. Chair, this report has been prepared by Marion as Chief Social Work Officer, but brought to Cabinet myself as Chair of the Public Protection Chief Officers Group. as members of Cabinet, we will know that we have a responsibility to learn from all adverse, incidents in terms of public protection. In the past, we would have called them significant case reviews. They're now called public protection learning reviews. And the depth that we now do these reviews, with what we tend to do is appoint independent leads in terms of doing that and bringing that forward in terms of making sure we have the depth of review and the ability to publish the review and actually take that learning forward is really important. The paper lays out the learning review process. It also lays out, the responsibility of the council to take forward that process and the costs associated with that. Members, these costs were built in by Joe into the budget that you've approved, recently, so they're not new costs, they're costs that were already approved by the budget. This is us following through with that and just giving a bit of detail, around the implementation of that and seeking, approval of the recommendations at paragraph 2.
Thanks, Eddie. I think quite straightforward there. Members were happy with that? Okay, can we agree recommendations? Okay, thanks. Now go to David McDowell. David, consultation on the proposed community wealth building Scotland.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide members with an update on the events taking place at national level in relation to the consultation on the proposed community wealth building bill, including the introduction of legislation later this year. Paragraphs 3 to 8 set out the background to community wealth building as an alternative approach to traditional economic development, maximising the partnership working with anchor institutions by focusing on the 5 pillars for harnessing existing resources to support the local economy. And as members will be aware, Ayrshire has also adopted a 6th pillar relating to climate action to align community wealth building actions to be delivered under each council's climate strategy. Members will recall that Cabinet approved the Year 2 Community Wealth Building Progress Report on the 18th of January, which highlighted how community wealth building principles would be integrated into collective work across the council, which will be considered later this week at the Ayrshire Community Wealth Building Commission. The Ayrshire Growth Deal has been a catalyst to take forward community wealth building across Ayrshire, and in particular the £3 million community wealth building project focused on dedicated staffing, Fair Work Ayrshire and the Business Support Fund, and has provided essential resources to directly support local communities and business. The recently approved Ayrshire Regional Economic Strategy has a strategic focus on creating an inclusive wellbeing economy for Ayrshire, with community wealth building as an overarching theme, which is central to enabling the vision for a wellbeing economy. At national level, the Scottish Government is in the process of developing legislation which will enshrine the principles of community wealth building, and a consultation paper named the Building Community Wealth in Scotland was launched in January 2023 with a consultation closure date of the 25th of April 2023, and is expected to be presented to Parliament in November 2023. The purpose of this consultation was to gather a broad range of views on how the new legal measures or changes to existing laws could accelerate the delivery of community wealth building in Scotland and deliver real benefits for local communities. To support the development of this legislation, a community wealth building steering group has been established, chaired by the Minister for Public Finance, Planning and Community Wealth, with representatives from community wealth building pilot areas and key stakeholders across the public, private and sector, and this also includes representation from Ayrshire. Paragraph 14 sets out the first area which the consultation focuses on in relation to the duty to advance community wealth building, all of which are being delivered at present by this authority as reported to Cabinet previously. In terms of the 5 pillars, the consultation asked respondents to consider if there are ways in which the law could be changed to advance their objectives, both in terms of devolved and reserved legislation. The Council's proposed response is attached at Appendix 1. In terms of the duty to advance wellbeing, our response demonstrates the extent of which community wealth building is is already embedded within corporate plans and strategies, including the community and strategic plans, the regional economic strategy, as well as operational and service delivery documents. Furthermore, the year-end reporting requirements which the Community Wealth Building Commission has put in place across the region also allow anchor organisations to demonstrate the successes and failures and barriers and solutions required to take up action where appropriate. As well as our own response, the Council is also contributing to the development of a collective regional response which will be considered by the Ayrshire Community Wealth Building Commission on Friday. This report, in setting out the Council's response to the proposed legislation, demonstrates the extent of which the Ayrshire region, as an early adopter of community wealth building through the Ayrshire Growth Deal funding, is leading the field in Scotland. It is clear that some of the proposals to advance wellbeing have already been implemented in Ayrshire, and whilst there is much work still to do, we believe that elements of the Ayrshire model could be adapted and implemented across the country. However, as noted in paragraph 21, the additional work that this might entail will require Scottish Government to ensure that any additional requirements are properly resourced in terms of staffing and finance, particularly for the Ayrshire region, to maintain its current delivery, impetus in community wealth building after the Ayrshire Growth Deal funding is exhausted. Chair, the recommendations are set out in paragraph 2, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, David. Any comments or questions from the Barry?
Thank you, Chair. And this is more just a procedural point that obviously I note the recommendations. However, given the way we have dealt with consultation, significant consultation responses in the last term of this council was for council to approve these. Shouldn't the recommendation, particularly at 3, not be that we approve, that we would recommend that council approve, because this will still need council's approval, by my understanding, but perhaps somebody can just confirm.
David, you. David Madell, do you want to come?
No, all I was going to add, Chair, was that we've had in the past, obviously, and I can take you back to NPF4 as an example, where we have brought that response to Cabinet, and that's been the response that's been taken from there to the Scottish Government. But I'm happy to hear any alternatives. Thanks, Chair.
And I note that, however, as you will recall, at the last term, was actually an item for Colin. I think it was an education item, whereby it was a decision of the council that we take forward any consultation responses by the council go through council, not just Cabinet.
The issue the last time was the education consultation in the early life of the previous term, where the report in front of Cabinet in the name of officers gave a certain level of response to the proposals to nationalise the education service, and then amendments were made by the then portfolio holder, which had an impact, quite a significant impact on the actual recommendations in the paper. The change that was made after that was where it was likely that, or the potential was there for a significant difference of political views on any matter, it would be taken to the sounding board for a steer then, or a discussion amongst the group leaders as to what's the best route to go on any particular matter in consultation in this case. I don't think this one has been to sounding board, but I think that's maybe because it was perceived, hopefully rightly, that there would be general support in terms of the direction of travel here with the community wealth building. So the factual position is the proposed response is here today for approval by Cabinet. If everyone is generally supportive, there would be no need to take it to council. If there isn't that support, then notwithstanding it wasn't discussed at sounding board on this occasion, then the option would still be there for Cabinet to refer this up to council. But I think that would only be necessary if there was any significant disagreement on the proposed response that Cabinet's been asked to endorse, and then take that difference to be settled at council, I think was the intention from the last one and the arrangements that were put in place following the last one. So, as I said, it hasn't been to sounding board. There wasn't that discussion. I don't think it was seen to give rise to significant divergence. It's here for Cabinet to approve, but if for any reason Cabinet wasn't minded to approve, or any member of Cabinet was minded to seek referral to council, then that would be an option to put to Cabinet today.
And thank you, Chair, and thank you, David, for that. As I say, that my understanding may be wrong, but I thought we'd taken the view that any consultations in the name of the council were going through council. I've no issue with this, absolutely not. In fact, you know, absolutely a supporter of community wealth building. I was just seeking to make this point. I'll seek some further clarification out with here, but you know, happy to be guided as I have been by you so far, David.
What we thought, just to clarify, I'm happy to pick it up, but again, it is important that all members be satisfied. The outcome from the last one was an agreement that we would have discussion, and obviously Sounding Board has no decision-making powers. That's just an informal discussion forum, but it allows that open discussion. So what was agreed was consultations that might, like the education one, give rise to clearly divergent political views would be discussed at Sounding Board and agree where they went, rather than, and I'm quite clear that was the amendment, discussed at Sounding Board for agreement to be reached. And clearly, if there was that divergence of views, then the outcome would be a consultation would go to Council to get a fully reflective Council response. But if the discussion had been, and if there is no divergence, then thinking was not to clog Council up with every consultation response, just to take the ones to Council where there might be significant difference of views. So I can offer you that assurance that it isn't the case that all consultations were agreed in the back of the education one 5 years ago to go to Council. It was agreed there would be a discussion at Sounding Board for the ones that might need to go to Council, and agreement reached. But as I say, this one wasn't discussed because I don't think it met that test, and you've confirmed yourself the actual content is acceptable. So the idea was not to take to Council that which can be competently and appropriately dealt with by Cabinet on an agreed basis.
I remember the National Care Strategy as well. That was something we took to Council as well.
The National Care Strategy, because we had that discussion at Sounding Board, because clearly that had the potential to go anywhere. We had the discussion at Sounding Board, and it was agreed amongst the group leaders that we would take that one to Council, clearly, as we did, I think, last December. So, yeah, that's an example of it being applied. I don't think this is an instance of it not being applied. I don't think there was any view that this would be likely to give rise to a divergence of views. I think there is general support across the political spectrum for the proposals on community wealth building.
No, thanks, Dave. That kind of clarifies things. You okay with that, Barry?
Yeah, okay, fine. I'll take it as read.
Okay, thanks. Can we agree the recommendations then?
Agreed.
Okay. Item 10, electrical vehicle charging infrastructure and investment in Ayrshire. I take this one. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update Cabinet on the findings from the Ayrshire Public Electric Vehicle Charging Business Case and the proposed next steps. Paragraphs 3 to 12 provide details on the background to EV charging. The proposals in the Ayrshire-wide business case were developed to align with the £60 million fund to maximise the potential for leveraging external funding for the anticipated proposals for expansion of our electric vehicle charging network. Paragraphs 13 to 24 details the business case. Mott MacDonald Limited were appointed to develop the business case, which was completed in December 2022. The business case sets out how the three Ayrshire councils could work together to expand the EV charging infrastructure network to meet projected EV demand over the next 3 to 4 years. The business case sets out proposals for collaborative delivery between the three councils and the market by blending required public investment for EVI with commercial EVI investment. Table 1 highlights the number of proposed and existing charge points across the three Ayrshire council areas emerging from the study. The business case proposes 146 EVCI for East Ayrshire through a mix of dual socket AC posts and single socket DC. The estimated capital investment required to deliver the above network is summarised in Table 3. The full programme costs are approximately £5.4 million, which includes the capital costs above alongside other items such as maintenance and transaction costs. It is proposed that this would be met through private sector investment, grant funding from the Scottish Government and through operational cash flow, the income generated from the Council's existing portfolio of charge points and newly installed EVCI. Scottish Futures Trust have advised that the allocation of grant may vary from the current figure. Paragraphs 25 to 28 details the operating models and preferred option. The business case identified 4 potential commercial models to consider for the delivery of an expanded network. ranging from fully private sector led, fully public sector led, and 2 public-private partnership hybrids, and these are summarised in Table 5. The models were assessed with weighted scoring in relation to affordability, social outcomes, risk allocation, contestability, procurement resources and revenue. Although any of the models could potentially be viable, Model B scored the highest and is the recommended option. In addition, the ability to leverage in private sector funding is expected to improve the prospect of a successful grant funding application to Transport Scotland. Appendix 2 provides further detail and assessment scoring of the 4 different models. Paragraphs 29 to 35 highlight the need for a pan-Ayrshire tariff and the inter-authority agreement and lead authority together with next steps for delivery. As the number of EVs has now increased significantly, particularly since 2020, a tariff is now needed to manage the cost of electricity and maintenance associated with EV charger use. Currently, the costs of public EV charging units is unbudgeted for, with costs met by Ayrshire Roads Alliance. There is not currently a tariff set for EV charge points in East Ayrshire Council. However, a tariff has been developed and is expected to be introduced during 2023. North Ayrshire Council's tariff equates to 19 pence per kilowatt hour for destination charge points and 30 pence per kilowatt hour for rapid charge points. The business case recommends a new tariff be implemented across the 3 council areas for price synergies and consistency within the region and be affordable. The next steps for the overall EVI programme are detailed in paragraphs 33, with timescales estimated at this stage. It is recommended that one of the Ayrshire authorities act as the lead authority for the next phase of the programme, and it's proposed that East Ayrshire Council undertake this role given their current role in undertaking procurement activity for multiple authorities via the Ayrshire Roads Alliance, and the recommendations are contained in paragraph 2. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks. I think this report's necessary. I know there's that bit of inconsistency in we know there's a lot of visitors from North Ayrshire to both South and East Ayrshire to try and get the benefits. Frequently meet these at the appropriate places. Are we following up with quite an investment in the upgrading of the existing resources? Because we really need to make sure we get complete coverage. I know, for example, Ward 5, there's none, no points in that part of the community.
Do you, Chair, as part of the concession contract that the private sector operator or partner would undertake that for us? We wouldn't have any upgrade requirements or maintenance requirements. It's to transfer the risk over to the private sector.
Okay. Okay, any other points? Elaine?
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking for clarification on the setting of the tariffs over the lifetime of the contract. So who would have responsibility for that, with it being a pan-Ayrshire? Would it just be the lead authority that would be involved in that negotiation, or would it be the commercial operator, or would the other 2 Ayrshires be involved in that? That's my first question. And second question is around any possible potential for building into community benefits through this programme, if that could be considered as part of the negotiation. Thank you.
Excellent. Kevin?
Through you, Chair, Ayrshire Roads Alliance would be the lead organisation, or East Ayrshire Council would be the lead authority as part of the concession contract, and we would manage that contract on behalf of the 2 other Ayrshires, and we would have discussions with South Ayrshire and North Ayrshire in terms of setting tariff with the private sector operator. In terms of the second question from Councillor Cowan, yes, community benefits would be included as part of the concession contract, and that would be through the procurement process. Thank you, Chair.
So just a quick follow-up. Every time I ask about community benefit, this seems to be the stock answer I get about it'll be picked up in the procurement process. So I would not necessarily want to pick it up with our colleagues, but I'd appreciate it picking it up with other relevant officers within the council, because I think there might be potential for us to be perhaps a bit more innovative in some of these respects, especially when we see the severe financial constraints we have on both on our council services and the impact that that's having on our communities. So anything that we can do in that space that's similar to what's happened down the south with the 9 CC councils, also developer contributions from house building, that sort of thing. That's the direction of travel that I'm thinking about, and I realise it's maybe a bit radical at this moment in time, but it's just a good opportunity to bring that discussion into this open forum at this place. Thank you.
I'm wondering if we can just build that part of that in with the recommendations that we investigate community benefit as part of the process. As part of the ongoing discussions, David?
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, for this one specifically, but that is something that is part of the normal approach. I just need to be clear that sometimes when we're talking about community benefits arising from the award of contracts, they're not necessarily financial. Not every contract will be get a sum of money from the contractor as a community benefit. Sometimes it's benefits in kind, sometimes it's apprenticeships, traineeships, jobs opportunities. So by all means, there's discussions to be had. I'm not saying otherwise. It's just some of the other ones you referred to there, they're all pots of money. Not every community benefit translates into a pot of money. It's about, we can specify or indicate, we can't insist, we can indicate what we'd be looking for, but it's really a question to the contractors, what are they able and willing to provide during the life of the contract? And there is also the test of reasonableness and proportionality to the value of the contract and the nature of the contract. So it's just, as I say, I'm not sure that this one for operating this would actually envisage a sum of money coming in as a community benefit. It's a question of what other community benefits it might be reasonable for the contractor to provide, but there's no harm in setting out our stall. If you want to add something specifically to this minute to reflect Councillor Cowan's position that there'll be further, engagement with officers and discussion around that, fine. But as a general practice, we always look at every tender where the opportunities might be, having regard to what it is we're tendering, goods, services, works, and the value, etc. We always look for opportunities to seek community benefits. Be they financial or non-financial. If you want to put something in specifically around this one, that would be open to Cabinet to do so. And as I say, I would just invite members to note that they're not always, and appreciate members know that, but they're not always pots of money in terms of community benefits. Sometimes it's services in kind or other opportunities such as employment or training.
I mean, I would envisage with the community benefit would be including, ask them to include some of the areas that are not within the programme, or help to support regeneration of our town centres and our communities. Because some of the rural areas that don't have them, some of the, some of the poorer areas of the town, for example, our community that don't have really good access to it. So I think it might not be a commercial priority for the contractor, but something that we'd like to make sure that nobody's left out, and also support town centre regeneration. Elaine?
Yeah, it's probably just a personal interest that I've got that's driving this, and I certainly wouldn't want to hamper ARA's negotiation with this contract by adding anything that would be a bit more onerous. But I do want to have a further debate about what we define as community benefit, and accept it's not just all financial, but I think that there's opportunities here that maybe if we think a little bit differently, and if we can involve our communities a bit more and give them that authority to decide what the priorities are. And I know there's other schemes within the council through PB processes and other things like that, but it's just maybe how we can pull that together to be a bit more progressive. So I'm happy for it not to be in the recommendation in this paper, but if it can be kept in the forefront of people's minds during negotiations, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
I think it would strengthen it actually if we kept in the recommendations. I don't think it would do any particular harm. Katie, you were wanting in?
Just for you, Chair, I'm happy, you know, Elaine and I had touched base offline on this, and it is a very interesting, bigger subject, particularly in the context of David's paper around community wealth building. So there's a whole thing about procurement, and we've been really innovative here, but we can only get better. You know, you think about the defibrillator initiative, that's all been funded through that process, and, you know, a respectful funeral. So we've been really good around procurement. We've got a really great procurement team, and, you know, maybe we need to explore further areas. I don't think it's as radical as you say, and I think there are opportunities with big buying power with ourselves and our partners as part of wealth building and anchor organisations. So should we trying to lever things towards our priorities and, in fact, the strategic plan that Ian highlighted earlier on. So happy to have some discussions offline with key colleagues and put some ideas around, and then see if we can build something around it and build on the good practice, because I do think East Ayrshire is at the forefront of really, you know, innovative procurement, but we could go further, particularly in these tough times. So thanks for bringing it up.
Thanks, Katie, for explaining what I was going to try and put into words about the community wealth building aspect of it. But what I just wanted to note was when broadband was getting rolled out, they cherry-picked all the best places and left the rurals and they left the poor areas. So I would hate to see that happen again in terms of equity as well. So thanks very much. And Elaine, I think you're absolutely right with the community benefits. We looked at community benefits during the LDP. In fact, they were so important, we took them aside and had our own members' officers working group on it. So it might be able to build on the results we got out of that as well. No, I don't think it's radical. I think it's what we should be doing. So thank you.
I mean, we want to be absolutely inclusive, and I think if we put out, you know, a part of the recommendation is to explore any community benefit where possible. Add that to recommendations. Maureen. You there, Maureen? I'll bring John. John, do you want to come in first?
Yes, I was just going to say it would be good, you know, if ARA would keep a close eye on what's happening with hydrogen fuel and working that into how much money we invest in electric chargers and everything, because I mean, at the moment, apparently we've got about 700,000 electric vehicles on the road in Britain, but overall there's the 26 million. And there's, you know, there's a school of thought that thinks the charging of 26 million electronic vehicles is a technical impossibility, both of the electricity network and simply doing it. And the electronic vehicles are battery-powered ones are going to go the way of the Betamax. And the reason behind that is in the very, very recent future, there was only a few places like in California and places they were running a few hydrogen cars as experiments. But recently, the Japanese government have issued a memorandum. They expect in the very near future to have between 800,000 and 1 million hydrogen-powered vehicles on the road in Japan. The Chinese government have issued a target of 2 million cars on the road. And I mean, they've worked out at the moment, the problem with the hydrogen is by the time you make it and transport it and put it into the electric cars and the fuel cells, it's theoretically it's only 40% efficient. But then they've realised now that if they produce the hydrogen with renewable sources which can't be used, they can't use the power at night. If it was used when the demand is down because the wind's blowing all the time, actually they half that price and double the efficiency. And so that, I mean, they're looking at powering trains and aeroplanes with hydrogen fuel, which means the hydrogen fuel is going to be much more available. And on the back of that, Caterpillar, one of the biggest manufacturers of engines for Caterpillar vehicles, trucks, lorries, and all sorts, they make engines for everything. They've just opened an enormous plant, I think it's in India, making nothing but hydrogen-powered combustion engines that will simply burn the hydrogen the way a standard car operates. And then again, just recently, Porsche have now started working on combustion hydrogen engines for their cars, and BMW, they've just done that last week. So the rate at all that's moving does warrant being very careful in the length of contracts we go into with electronic vehicles. because it strongly looks like hydrogen is going to be the VHS and battery power is going to be the Betamax of this game. And if you go back over 100 odd years when they first invented cars, and sorry, I'm not boring you all, there was more electric cars put on the road than petrol and diesel cars when cars were first invented, and the electric cars went the way of the dodo. And so, I mean, I think what you're going to find is because there'll be such a demand for hydrogen fuel for aeroplanes and commercial vehicles and buses that the electricity will be charging will be not feasible, and it's going to end up going towards the hydrogen route, because basically you can drink what comes out the tailpipe. It's water. That's all that comes out them. And hydrogen is the most abundant element in the whole world. Anyway, it's the end of my rant.
No, John, without your knowledge in the automotive sector, you might have a few folk greeting at this top table right enough, but they've bought a Betamax. But not to worry. Maureen, you went in, Maureen? I don't know if we've lost Maureen or... Jim, do you want to comment in time?
Thanks, Chair. You're lucky you've got your Betamax. I'm still waiting. I mean, it's still in order, still to be built yet. And then that's another story. Would remiss me not to pay tribute to your predecessor on this, and Kenny, and the marvellous work that he did outside the city deals. I think Kilmarnock was the first place to have an electric charging hub. I'm looking at the figures, Kevin, and I think in East Ayrshire we set over the three authorities we've got 50% on the 62, and that shows the work that Kenny did. I just hope we're not being held back with other two, because we have been innovative in driving forward with electric charging systems. I just hope when we get into partnership, the maintenance of these are up to spec with the amount that we're putting in. I did ask previously, when we look at the rural areas, and some of the rural areas, and I'm thinking in particular the end villages that are staying and so on, where folk don't have, I know everybody's got a driveway, they don't even have a bus, so they can't go on a bus to go and charge their car and then get it back. So I think it's important we don't forget wee places like that, and they will need some of that infrastructure as well.
Absolutely. Okay, I just assume that nobody else. Maureen, I don't know. You'd stuck up your hand, but your hand's down now. I don't know if there's an issue.
She's off. Yeah, so she's just looking through.
Just looking.
That's right.
So, okay. Can we go to recommendations? Therefore, can we agree recommendations? And the additional recommendation that we consider community benefit as part of the process. Okay, thanks, Christian. Okay. And the final item is proposed installation of road humps and zebra crossing, Irvine Road, Kilmores. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise Cabinet that objections have been received to a proposal to provide road humps and a zebra crossing on Irvine Road, Kilmores, originally conditioned as a developer obligation associated with planning consent 16/0083/PP, and to ask Cabinet to approve the officer recommendation that the scheme should proceed. As part of the consideration of a new residential development taking access onto Irvine Road, Kilmores, the ARA sought the attachment of a planning condition to introduce a scheme of traffic calming and enhance pedestrian crossing facilities on Irvine Road. These measures were considered by ARA to be necessary to help mitigate the impacts that trips generated by the new development would have on the adjacent public road network. The specific measures consisted of a new zebra crossing facility located in Irvine Road, approximately 10 metres to the east of its junction with Carmel Place, and traffic calming in the form of 12 speed cushions configured in 6 sets of 2 spaced along Irvine Road between the site access and the junction with Yardside to the east. A total of 3 objections were received to the proposals to introduce a zebra crossing and implement speed cushion traffic calming on Irvine Road. ARA contacted all 3 objectors in order to offer additional information where requested, address areas of concern and explore potential scheme adjustments as considered practicable. ARA have considered all aspects of the maintained objection and offered further comment or information as summarised in paragraphs 17 to 24 above. The scheme proposals will lower vehicle speeds in the area whilst also encouraging modal shift away from private car towards walking and cycling. The zebra crossing and speed cushion features within the scheme have been designed to comply with all current standards. Police Scotland have been consulted in both the zebra crossing and speed cushions and have offered their full support for the scheme. The recommendations are contained in paragraph 2. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Any comments? John?
All I ever get at the Comores Community Council is you've got to do something to stop all the speeding. So anything like that is definitely very, very welcomed.
Thanks, John. Okay, can we agree recommendations? Okay, and can I thank everybody for your attendance today? Thank you.
Thanks, Leader.